Hello and welcome to another episode of the Top Dogs podcast here on the Field of 68 Media Network. My name is Rob Doster, and you guys want to talk about the Huskies knocked off Georgetown 93-79 last night in the XL Center in Hartford in a game that started out pretty ugly. At one point, Georgetown was up 14-4, but UConn came back. UConn held a lead at the half, which is something of a minor miracle, and they put up their best offensive performance since a game against Maryland Eastern Shore all the way back in November. It is the best performance on a points per possession basis that we've seen from UConn offensively since November. And I think that's something that's important. I think it's something that matters, and I think it's something that we're going to need to sit here and kind of talk about a little bit. So before we do, please make sure you rate, review, subscribe to this podcast anywhere that you can engage and interact with this podcast. Helps with the algorithm, and we are all loyal to the almighty algorithm in the year of our Lord 2025. So a couple things. This is going to be a quick episode because I don't want to dive too much into it. A couple of big games coming up for UConn seeding purposes, for Big East tournament seeding purposes, and for, frankly, vibes heading into March. But I think that getting going offensively was something that I really, really wanted to see from this group, right? It feels like for a while they've been kind of stuck in the mud on that under the floor, right? Teams have been able to get physical with them. Teams have been able to blow up some of the sets they want to run. It has not been something where UConn is routinely getting open look after open look after open look, creating rolls to the rim, creating opportunities for Terrace Reed to get touches in the post. It just has not felt like a prototypical Dan Hurley offense, probably since Liam McNeely got injured. And this was the first time where it really looked like they were clicking on the offensive end of the floor. And a lot of that probably has to do with the fact that Thomas Sorber didn't play and Drew Fielder fouled out with 15 minutes left in the game, right? I don't think that this was anywhere near the best Georgetown team or best Georgetown performance that you're ever going to see. But just simply finding a way to get going on that end of the floor. Get Liam McNeely having a big game, Solo Ball having a big game. Hassan Diarra went for 14 and 7, which was as well as he's played probably since he was dealing with this knee thing in the first place. You got 20 points and 10 boards out of Terrace Reed, who I think is someone that, again, 27 minutes versus 13 for Samson Johnson. That kind of timeshare minute breakdown is something that UConn needs, right? But the biggest thing is that I feel like at this point, UConn needs to lean into what they are this season instead of trying to be something that they're not. They are a team that can put up 85, 90, 95 points on just about anybody in college basketball. When they get going, Solo Ball can light you up for 25. Liam McNeely, we've seen go for 38 this season, right? Alex Caravan, we know what he can do when he's playing right and when he's mentally in the right state. Terrace Reed, 20 and 10 today. He can dominate teams that don't have big physical five men. We've seen Jalen Stewart hit for 15 and a half, right? And I think leaning into being a team, being a program that can go and win a game offensively, regardless of who they are playing, is something that really, really matters for this group. Because I don't think that they're winning games on the defensive end of the floor. I don't think they want to be a team that has to play grinders to be able to win games, because they're not going to be able to win those games. They just don't have the pieces for it. They don't have the bodies for it. They don't have the mindset for it. That is not who they are as a program. That is not what they are going to do to win college basketball games this season. And seeing them find a way to be able to get into the flow offensively for the first time since November like this is something that matters. And remember, it's not like the start of this game they were on fire from the rip. It was 14-4 at one point, and UConn was kind of stuck in the mud for like the first 4 minutes of this game. And to see this level of confidence, this level of offensive execution is something that's really, really important. Now, again, a lot of it's got to be contextualized, right? Terrace Reed going up against just Jordan Burks and backup fivemen. He's going to eat teams and programs like that alive when you have to play in that situation. And it's not like Georgetown has all that much left to play for at this point. They're playing for Big East tournament seeding, and there's only so much motivation that you're going to get on the road when your best player is out for the year, when all you have to reward yourself is Big East tournament seeding. So it's hard to do that. But like I said, I think that this team, if they really want to have a chance to be able to make some noise in March, they have to be willing to gamble on trying to score 95 every night. They have to have that mindset where if you got to win a game 95-92, it'll work. Look at what happened last year with Alabama and Nate Oates, right? And I think that Alabama was probably a little bit more lethal offensively and had a little bit more NBA talent than this UConn team does. But the question we had all season long was, will Alabama be able to play enough defense when it matters? And when you got into the tournament, they were able to make enough plays on that end of the floor that they could get to the Final Four with a team that was kind of profiles fairly similarly to UConn. They were both outside the top 100 in offensive efficiency. UConn, when they are at their best, when they've been at full strength with McNeely, gets close to that top three line when it comes to offensive efficiency. Not what Alabama was last year, but they can be something similar with explosions where they can look as good as Alabama did. And I think that's who UConn wants to. If they want to be able to make noise in March, that's who they need to lean into being. And that leads me to my next point. I think as of now, this should be essentially a 7-man rotation, right? I think you need to have the starting five: Karaban, McNeely, Solo Ball, Haas, and Sampson, with Terrace Reed playing the majority of the minutes at the 5 coming off the bench, and Jalen Stewart as the guy that comes in for whichever perimeter player needs a blow. And you can just kind of cycle those guys through. Get Noel a couple minutes here or there when you can, just, if you need to spell Haas, if you want to give him a little bit of run, get a little bit of experience, you can do that. I don't think Aiden Mahaney can play anymore. I would not be playing Jaden Ross at this point. Go with that 7-man rotation. You got those 7 that work, and just see what that'll get you. It's not going to be the best defensive teams that we've ever seen. It's not going to be the best defensive lineups that we've ever seen. But I don't think that necessarily matters. If you put up 95 points, the other team's got to score 96 to be able to beat you. And there aren't a ton of teams in college basketball that can score 95, 96 points on a given night. So that's where I'm at with it at this point with this group. Lean into being someone that can't really guard. And the other part of it is it's not just completely forego the defensive end of the floor. I don't. That's not what I'm saying. Like, I don't think that you just have to start playing Matador defense for 39 minutes a game. We've seen this team be able to dig deep and get some stops when they need it at certain times, right? I would make the argument that over the course of the last month, they've been better on that end of the floor. They came back to earth a little bit in terms of the defensive efficiency numbers, thanks to giving up 79 to Georgetown. But this is still a team that has improved on the defensive end and has some guys that can, put it in a little bit of a fight when you need it. But I just don't think they're ever going to be a great defensive team, because they're not going to ever be a great defensive team. So why not lean into the thing that you do well and the strengths that you have as a program? And that's kind of where I'm at with it with UConn this season. And I think that's their best bet to be able to make some noise here in March. Credit to Solo Ball. I thought Solo had a really, really good game, a little bit of an underrated game. Made a bunch of shots, had a couple of big threes, got to the basket a couple times. No turnovers, which was a big one. UConn as a team only had 10 turnovers, which is something that really does help when you don't give the ball away to the other team. I think that I've said it all year. Like, Haas ends up being the guy that is so important to what this group could do, because they don't have much of that perimeter backcourt depth that you would probably like. And when McNeely is right, when McNeely is playing well, it just changes what the ceiling of this group can be. So it was nice to see a lot of those guys get going. Coming up next is a trip to Providence. Then you get Marquette at home. And right now, I think UConn is kind of in that weird spot where they're in the 8-9 game, but they're closer to being a 10 seed than they are to being a 7 seed, much closer to being a 10 seed than they are to being a 7 seed at this point. And I don't know how much a win at Marquette, or I'm sorry, a win at Providence, a win over Marquette, and a win over Seton Hall is going to necessarily change that when there are other teams in and around them that are having games against bigger name opponents, right? Like take Vanderbilt, for example. They were a 10 seed and are fielding the 68 bracket on Monday morning, and they went out and they won at Texas A&M, which is a quad 1A, one of the best wins that you can get in college basketball, which means they're probably going to be jumping UConn when it comes to where they are in the seed lines, especially if they win a couple more games. So that's kind of what UConn is dealing with at this point, where they got to keep scrapping to try to stay in that 8-9. Um, Frankly, I think they should. I think they would prefer if you were a 10 seed as opposed to an 8-9 seed. I have a very hard time seeing this UConn team being able to beat. I don't think they can beat Auburn. I don't think they can beat Duke. I don't think that they can beat this iteration of Houston. Maybe Florida, because Florida does not have quite the same level of ball pressure and defensive intensity that those other three teams do. They are not. They don't force as many turnovers, but Florida is also an unbelievably dangerous team. And Walter Clayton is a guy that is an All-American caliber player. I just don't think you want to see any of those three teams. That's not to say that UConn is going to be beating a Tennessee or a Iowa State or any of those teams that are kind of in, or in Alabama, any of those teams that are kind of in that next tier. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that there's a reason why those teams are 2 seeds and not 1 seeds. And I've always been of the belief that a 10 seed is probably a little bit better than a 9 seed or an 8 seed, because I don't think there's much difference between a 7 seed and a 9 seed when it comes to who your opponent is. So avoiding that 8-9 game is something that I think would be really big for the Huskies this season, and kind of where they are right now. I saw someone speculating about where this group is going to be next year. And what I'll say is that I would be I would be making sure, if I was the staff, I would be making sure that I'm funneling minutes to Terrace to see what happens when he becomes the guy, knowing that Sampson's gone next year. I would be funneling minutes to Jalen Stewart, knowing that he is going to be someone that is expected to step into a bigger role next season. Um, I don't know if I'd be doing the same with Amon Noel at this point, mostly because I just don't know if he's ready for the level of point guard play that's going to have to come in next year. If I am UConn and I'm looking towards the future, the three that I am trying to make sure come back no matter what happens are Solo Ball, Jalen Stewart, and Terrace Reed. I think we're going to have another run down to the NBA draft deadline with Alex Caravan and the decision that he's going to make to go pro. I think there's a lot of reasons for him to just say, look, this was enough. I'm going to head off to the NBA. And there's also plenty of reasons to say, like, look, you probably want to come back for another year. So that decision-making process will be interesting, but it's those 3/4 that are the core that I think that you need to focus on keeping out of the portal. And then with the recruiting class that's coming in, I don't think any of those guys are necessarily going to be close to the level of a Liam McNeely or Steph Castle in terms of their impact. I think Braylon Mullins is probably the most likely to be able to come in and impact Big East games early on. I think Eric Ryba probably will need a little bit of seasoning. My guess is that the best case scenario for him would be to be a backup 5 next year. If it ends up being a situation where you get 27 minutes a game out of Terrace Reed and 13 minutes a game out of Eric Ryba, that is a good scenario. I don't know if it's necessarily the best scenario, but I think it's a good scenario. But if I'm Hurley, if I'm this coaching staff, what I'm doing is going all out in the portal on a point guard. I'm spending significant percentage of the budget that's made available in NIL on landing one of the best point guards that hops up in the portal this year. And I've heard some names that they have been looking at. I've heard some names that are considering entering the portal, and I don't want to go down that road at this point, but some interesting potential additions, some interesting names that have been kind of linked already. And I think making sure that point guard spot, whoever is brought in there, is good enough to be able to carry the load, is going to be what ends up being the most important part of UConn's offseason. More important than getting some of these guys back, more important than whether or not Alex Caravan goes to the draft. That is going to be the difference maker and the differentiator on whether or not UConn is a team that can get close to Big East championship level again next season. So that is one thing to absolutely keep an eye on as you look to see which point guards enter the portal, which big guards enter the portal, which playmaking guards enter the portal. And that's the one that I will be tracking as much as anything when it comes to UConn and when it comes to what they are going to be doing this season. Providence on the road next. That will be a Saturday afternoon game. It is never easy to go into that building and win, but Providence has lost 2 in a row. They've lost 6 out of 7. I don't even know. I don't think I've watched a Providence game in 2 months. So Bryce Hopkins isn't playing. I know that. I honestly couldn't even tell you if Corey Floyd is back. I'm going to look it up right now, and yep, Corey Floyd is back. But the other big Krisis and Doko has not been playing. So this is not a game that you want to lose if you're Hurley and knowing what you're walking into in that building, what you're walking into in that facility, what you're walking into in that state. So here's the hoping that they find a way to avoid a loss. The one thing I will say is this: the matchup, generally speaking, tends to be relatively positive for UConn. This will be a big game for McNeely. What Providence did in the last matchup, if you guys remember, was they completely sold out on the perimeter. They were top locking. They were switching on all of the perimeter screens. It was one of Hassan Diarra's best games of the season. But UConn at one point, I think, was down 16 in the first half, and they scored 60 points in the second half, largely because they were able to get the ball into those positions in the middle of the floor and play those 2-on-1s. And Haas played well. And that's where they were really effective. I think Solo played pretty well too. So being able to take advantage of those guards really overplaying on the perimeter is going to be something that matters. Aiden Mahaney also played one of his best games. It'll be interesting to see if they use him. Liam McNeely did not play, and in the same way that it was a favorable matchup against Creighton, I think it is something where it'll be a favorable matchup for UConn against Providence, and we'll see. We'll see if they find a way to be able to get it done. You know it's going to be loud. You know it's going to be raucous. You know there's going to be tall boy Bud Lights flowing. So it'll be one to, at the very least, it'll be a scene. So we'll see how that all plays out. That'll be on Saturday. I'll be back with another episode then. We're going to talk about the Marquette game next Tuesday. And then it's Seton Hall Saturday, and the Big East tournament kicks off after that. It's hard to believe we are officially 2 days away from the month of March here on the Field of 68. College basketball fans, are you ready to take your hoops game to a new level? Whether you're a seasoned bettor or just trying to win your March Madness office pool, Rhythm is here to give you the edge this season. With data-driven predictions for every single college basketball game left on the schedule, Rhythm helps you maximize your bets. And as March Madness kicks off, Rhythm's insights will help you spot those plucky Cinderellas that you know are going to shake up the NCAA tournament. But that's not all. When Selection Sunday rolls around, let Rhythm's AI-powered bracket generator do the heavy lifting for you. This is the same AI tool that performed 35% better than the average ESPN bracket last year. And here's the best part. Rhythm pairs perfectly with our Field of 68 expert analysis, giving you the 1-2 punch that you need for the rest of the college basketball season. So don't wait. Download Rhythm today and get ready to see college basketball and your betting results in a whole new light. If you haven't heard by now, we have partnered with BetMGM for this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for the listeners and the viewers of the Field of 68. Bet insurance tokens, odds boosts, and what I love, a nice parlay booster too here or there. Be sure to keep your eye out in the app for the Field of 68 specials that we'll be running throughout the season as well. So go download the BetMGM app to sign up today.